From CBS4 News, this is Facing South Florida with Jim DeFede.
Good morning, I'm Jim DeFede and welcome to Facing South Florida. Later in the show, we'll talk to Congresswoman Debbie Mercalzo-Powell as she reflects on her loss to Carlos Jimenez, as well as the likelihood of a much-needed stimulus bill passing during this lame duck session of Congress. Now, normally, if I had a member of Congress on my show, I would lead my show with that interview. But instead, I want to focus on the issue of food insecurity, as far too many families in our community are unable to keep food on their tables. We have seen the lines at food banks where people wait for hours for assistance. This week, I spoke to Paco Vélez, the president and CEO of Feeding South Florida, and asked him to describe the scale of the problem.
What's most troubling for us right now here at Feeding South Florida is at the end of this week, we're receiving our last shipment of the coronavirus food assistance program that comes through CARES Act dollars from the federal government, which means that we're going to have a significant gap in food that's coming down to South Florida to serve our families that are continuing to struggle, continuing to not be able to put food on the table. And that's really what's my biggest stressor right now, trying to bring in more food to make up for that gap. So the latest numbers that we're seeing first just on the ground is we've gone from serving 706,000 individuals from Palm Beach down to the Keys to now serving over 1.5 million individuals in that same 4-county area. We've gone from distributing 61.5 million pounds of food last fiscal year to this past fiscal year ending June 30th, 119 million pounds of food, so almost double the need. What we're seeing from the U.S. Census data is that South Florida continues to be the second worst in terms of losing employee wages, food scarcity, and housing insecurity. And that's one of the reasons that Feeding South Florida is the second largest food bank in the country in terms of pounds distributed, right behind the folks in Houston. And if you look at the census data, same information. Houston is the worst. South Florida is the second worst. So that's what we're seeing anecdotally here, and that's what we're seeing in data across some of these surveys.
So what exactly is it about South Florida that makes the need so great? What is it unique to us that we're seeing here that we rank second in all of these terrible categories?
So South Florida we're very unique in the sense that we're a destination spot. Folks pick us to come in and visit, to tour, to vacation, or as a point to a cruise. So we have the cruise industry, which was shut down. We have the hotel and restaurant industry, which was shut down. Our 3 airports that struggled: Palm Beach, the Fort Lauderdale Airport, Miami-Dade Airport. So we have a lot of individuals in these industries that were either their hours were cut, they were furloughed, or they were laid off, or just the businesses are struggling. So that's a lot of individuals that unfortunately have no resources coming in. In the beginning of this pandemic, we saw the CARES Act kind of act pretty quick to provide a stimulus check and provide unemployment benefits and emergency unemployment benefits, but those have since run out. I think the emergency unemployment benefits ran out in July, and since then, our families have not really received any kind of resources from the federal government, and are really struggling to keep a roof over their head and food on the table.
The toll that this takes on individuals and a family to sort of acknowledge that they are in need.
The desperation is growing and growing. The frustration is also growing. You see the families in line just wanting to do something, just begging to just get a job and to provide for their own families. And this is something that's been going on for over 9 months now. And we see the same story, different families, same story across all the counties. We just want a job. We just want to go back to work. We just want to make an income. We don't know how we're going to pay back our rent from 2 or 3 months ago. It's just so much has happened to these families, and it's through no fault of their own. The only thing that was wrong was, I say wrong, but it wasn't really wrong, was there was an industry that was forced to shut down. These families had no fault in having to be in these lines, having to wait for food, and having to figure out how they're going to make sure their kids go to bed with full bellies.
The active hurricane season we saw, we didn't get any direct hits, but we saw a lot of tropical storms and a lot of rain that did some serious damage to the farming industry in South Florida. That has its own ripple effect, doesn't it? Because not only does it affect the income of the farmers and those who work on those farms, but a lot of that food, some of that food would end up in your food banks, wouldn't it?
That's a very good point. These tropical storms, the last one that hit, really did a number on the farmland. A lot of folks don't realize that Palm Beach, Broward, and Miami-Dade have huge farming communities, and they don't just support food banks and the families we serve, they actually put food into the stores. And so because of this thunderstorm, it wiped out a lot of the farmland and a lot of the seeds that were already planted. So they had to replant, which pushed the harvest season back a few weeks. And then also it's limiting the supply of produce that's going to be harvested. So that's going to do a couple of things. One, it's going to drive up the cost of some of this produce that we're going to start seeing at the grocery store, not just for folks that can afford it, but folks that are on that cusp or on that edge, they're going to struggle to get fresh produce. The second thing it does is that it diminishes the amount of product that some of our farmers can donate to food banks and ultimately get on the tables of families. Our growers are in business for one reason, and that's to make sure families eat, whether you have the resources or you don't have the resources. Our farmers are there to feed our country, and right now it's going to be very difficult for them to donate to food banks because of the limited supply.
You talked before about how at the end of this week, the money set aside for under the CARES Act out of Washington basically runs out. We've been hearing about proposed, new packages coming out of DC, and it just getting mired. There seems to be no real movement in Congress, one step forward, two steps back. What would your message be to both Republicans and Democrats in Washington about what needs to take place from your perspective in terms of moving some of this legislation forward and not waiting until January 21st when a new president is installed?
So the CARES Act expires December 30th. The Coronavirus Food Assistance Program, which is a food program off that CARES Act, it expires this week. And so a lot of families are going to struggle. My message to our federal elected officials is look beyond the numbers and look into the eyes of the families that are struggling. These are real people, real families with real kids that are going to bed hungry. And because we can't seem to get our act together and figure out a number or some sort of a bridge, a lot of families are struggling and they're desperate. We may see some shoplifting just because folks need that food, and we may see some other crimes to help get money and put food on the table. But right now, we need some sort of a bridge to help our families. I know there's a vote coming up to keep our government open. My hope is that when Congress comes together and the two chambers come together to keep our government open, they choose to help our families, whether it's providing food or funding for food and housing, or providing money directly to our families so they can make up their mind where they want to spend it. Whatever it is, our families need our elected officials right now. They need our leadership to step up and be leaders.
Is there a story, an anecdote, someone who you've met that sticks with you, that humanizes it for you, puts a face to it?
There's unfortunately a lot, and there's two that come to mind. One was down in Miami at the fairgrounds, and there was this lady driving down in the line, about to get to the food, and I was walking around just looking and meeting people, just to get their story and kind of hopefully help in any way that I can in some sort of a emotional kind of sense. And this child in the back seat waves at me and just yells out, "Thank you, thank you." And it really hurt because the child obviously knew. She must have been 6 or 7 years old. She knew that there was no food in the household, and to say thank you, and just wave and get my attention really, really hurt, because our kids are the most innocent in this, and for them to be struggling to put food on the table is shouldn't happen, especially in the United States. And the second one was a lady that I went up to and asked if she had other food in the house, and all she said was no, and she turned away and started crying, and I started crying, and it was, the reality is a lot of families are hurting, so many are hurting, and I wish there was much more that we can do. People come up to me and say, you have a very rewarding job helping people, but the reality is it may be rewarding for a split second, but I know once that family goes home, there are a lot of issues that they're going to have to contend with, including figuring out where they're going to get food in the next 4 or 5 days.
If people watching this want to help in some way, what's the best way that they can offer some help to Feeding South Florida, your organization?
The 3 best ways right now to get involved, first and foremost, is to contact your elected official, your member of Congress, your senator, and let them know their families are struggling, and to push something forward to get families some help. Second way is to go to our website, feedingsouthflorida.org, and either donate funds or volunteer, or sign up to volunteer. And for those families that are struggling, go to feedingsouthflorida.org/COVID-19. There you'll find 2 buttons, a distribution locator, where you'll find a distribution in your area, and an agency locator that'll identify one of our 300 different partner agencies in your neighborhood.
If you can help, please do. We'll be right back with Congresswoman Debbie Mercalzo-Powell.